Welcome to Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. Be your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about your mindset, about dealing with what's going on, but remembering that you can go from despair to hope. Today we're talking about living well and dealing with depression. My guest today is Barbara Mezera, and she has written the book From Despair to Hope and Healing, One Woman's Journey in Poem. Now, I love poetry, so I'm so excited to be able to talk to her about how she has shared her healing process and her journey in poetry. So get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Barbara. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you are on today. You know, what we're about to talk about is so incredibly important, and I'm glad that you are addressing the subject matter, and we need to be more open about what's going on in our lives. But before we do that, I want to ask you a little bit more about who you are personally. So in your own words, who do you say Barbara is?
I grew up on a small farm in southwest Wisconsin. I have 5 siblings, and we were on the more poor side of the spectrum, but we were a close family, and we're still close today. Family was very important to my parents and to us, and they raised us in the Catholic faith, and that was a big part of our growing up. It's part of what helped me get through the depression was my belief that, you know, there is a higher power, a God, who is there, who is merciful and helps us deal with whatever we're handed in life.
And you know, I'm so happy that there have been studies done that really and truly show that people do better if they have a faith system, if they believe that God hears their prayers and will answer their prayers for their healing and for guidance. I have to agree with you on that one. Now, so many people are talking about anxiety and depression, or they're talking about PTSD and depression, and so many times it's not necessarily clinical terms that they're talking about, but they're just talking about feeling a sense of the blues. Just to make sure that we all understand what you are talking about, clinical depression or just feeling bluesy, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience and what you were told when you addressed your depression?
Well, you know, everybody goes through periods of being sad at times. You know, maybe it's a period of grief for them. Maybe they lost something that was very important to them. But most of those kinds of things that are just the blues, so to speak, have an ending and maybe a reason for them to happen. For me, it was pretty constant. I had a whole bunch more days that were down, horrible, than I had days that were good. And it was just never ending. And the interesting thing is a lot of people cycle down in the fall because they have seasonal affective disorder. Well, I always did better in the fall, but the spring and the summer for me were just horrible. And the difference between a major clinical depression is without treatment, whether it be the medication or therapy, you really struggle to just bring yourself out of it. Whereas a lot of times, you know, people can move through grief without professional help. People can move through certain losses in their life without professional help. And that's not to say that they aren't feeling some of the same things that I felt, but I just couldn't get out of it by myself. You know, no matter how many times I prayed, no matter how many times I asked God to help me, I had to go that extra step and get some medical and therapeutic help in order to, be able to deal with it.
Right. Right. And Barbara, I'm so glad that you brought up seasonal affective disorder because so many times people don't know that they're suffering from that, and that is different from clinical depression. So many times if you live in a place where it especially gets really cold or you have very drastic seasons, then you may be suffering from that. And like you said, it is something that tends to affect many people in the fall and winter months when we're kind of hunkered down inside and we have to deal with our day-to-day lives a little bit differently. Thank you so much for mentioning that. What you were talking about is actually having clinical depression, and that is something, just in case if someone is wondering, my blues does seem like it's lasting longer and longer, please seek professional help from a counselor or therapist that is near you who can really and truly diagnose you and be able to give you the proper care. Now, with what you are experiencing, Barbara, were you told that you needed to take antidepressants, or were you given a different diet? What were your treatments like?
I was told I needed to take an antidepressant, and sometimes when you're so depressed, you just go along with what anybody tells you. For me, I needed the antidepressants because there were things that had happened in my childhood, some abuse and some other things that are difficult to deal with, and I had no way of dealing with them without having the floor that the antidepressant would put under my depression so I could work through the emotional trauma that I had experienced as a young girl and as a teenager and then even into my early adulthood. So I needed the depression. I'm not one to say that everybody should take an antidepressant, even if they are clinically depressed, because there are other ways of managing it. And one of the best things people can do is to exercise. And there are now studies out there about exercise working as well as some of the antidepressants. And again, it's on a spectrum. It's on how deep it is, how long it's been going on. I was probably clinically depressed from the time I was 8 or 9 years old. So I had a long history of just trying to get through my day, not even realizing what was going on. And all that affects, do you really need antidepressants, or can you manage it with exercise and talk therapy? In the end, talk therapy became just as important as the antidepressants.
Now, for some people, they're saying, well, I don't know if I want to necessarily go and see a therapist. I just want my therapist to give me my meds, and I don't want to talk about anything. If you can, on a scale of 1 to 10, just for you personally, where would you say talk therapy assisted you? How effective was it for you?
Well, once I bought into it, and that took a few years. And also, for talk therapy to work for anybody, it has to be a right fit. And a lot of people give up on it before they find that right fit. Absolutely. I was fortunate. After 4 shots, I found a therapist who could deal with my silence, who didn't tell me, if you're not going to talk, don't bother to come back. She always said, the door's open, come back when you're ready. And that was hugely helpful for me. So, quite frankly, I'm still on an antidepressant. I tried to get off of it a couple of years ago, and it didn't work. I was getting irritable. It was beginning to have an effect on the students I teach, because some of the students that I never had problems with were looking at me and going, why are you so crabby all the time? And that wasn't their experience. So I just went back on the antidepressant, and kids haven't said that to me since. So obviously my chemical imbalance is a true chemical imbalance in the brain, and I need the antidepressants. But I also exercise every morning, and I don't have a therapist as such right now because I went the spiritual route, because I just felt I needed to work more on my spiritual life rather than going back and revisiting the trauma and stuff, because I feel like that was pretty much taken care of in the 6 to 10 years when I was in therapy. And it started weekly, and then it tapered off to once a month or whenever I felt I needed to really talk to somebody. And it helps to understand my background a little bit there, too, because in a lot of ways I was a selective mute. I didn't talk much. And I am a quiet, shy person, and that is just who I am. And it took me a long time to be okay with the fact that I will never be the life of the party. That's just not who I am. I'm the quiet, gentle person that will listen to people. And I had to be okay with being who I am before any of this was really going to work.
Well, you said something that is really important, and listeners, I want to really, really kind of highlight a statement, and that is that your therapist needs to be a good fit for you. I know that that's something that I actually put on my website, is that, we need to meet, we need to talk, and you need to be open enough to make sure that it's a good fit. Don't give up. And if I'm not the right therapist for you, or perhaps the next person or the next person, like Barbara said, they may not be the right fit for you, but keep going. Some people have come and visited, and on the second visit, they're like, yep, you're the one, because it's a good fit. So please, if you're seeking professional care, don't give up until you find the right person for you. And you will know the right person the same way you know about everything else that is true and correct in your life. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Now, one of the other things that you kind of touched on is when you're working. So many times in a work environment, we may be a little edgy or cranky or irritable, especially if we don't know what's going on and other people are starting to call our attention to that. How does being depressed affect you at work, and what are some things you think would be, what are some ways that you think can help someone dealing with depression at work to better cope?
One thing is, if you can trust your coworkers, is just be honest about it and just say, I have depression and today's just not a good day for me. And then you got to do your part too, and not immediately. For me, it came out as irritability, as anger, and it probably does for a lot of people. I snapped at people, and then it's like, okay, why did I do that? Well, that was the reaction in the instant, because I was trying not to let my depression take over everything and not doing a very good job at it. And the good thing is, more and more workplaces have opportunities for people to get help through their work personnel office or a health thing, because a lot of workplaces now have health and wellness plans, and a lot of them will include mental illnesses. So the stigma is still there, but it's not as bad as it was 30 years ago when I was first diagnosed.
Right.
People are a little bit more open about it, and people are a little bit more accepting of it too. A lot of it can be worked out just by being open and honest about what's going on at the time.
Right. Well, it is time for us to go to break, and I want to make sure that everyone remembers the name of your book. They know how to follow you online, but they also know where they can pick up a copy of your book. So if you would, Barbara, can you remind us, please, what is the best place to go to get a copy of your book, the title of your book, and how do we follow you online?
The title of my book is From Despair to Hope and Healing, One Woman's Journey in Poem. You can follow me online. I'm on Facebook, and you can contact me with my Gmail account, which is barbaramezera@gmail.com, and you can get the book at Amazon and other places. It's been published by Litfire Publishing, and Amazon's probably the best place to get it.
Alrighty, listeners, you now know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
with Infants by Montessori teacher trainer and world-renowned child specialist Beverly Kovach is finally on DVD and digital download. The long-awaited 3D disc set is essential for any new parent, grandparent, or infant caregiver wanting respectful relationships with infants and their care. Being with Infants is broken down into 20 easy-to-digest video lessons, complete with demonstrations. Everything from diapering, feeding, the proper way of picking up infants, sleep, crying, environment, play, weaning, and much more are covered. Being with Infants is available on DVD and digital download at Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Order today and be sure to follow Being with Infants on Facebook for free bonus content.
Smell Good Spa for the women who are making a conscientious change in their personal care products. Specializing in signature fragrance oils, hand-dipped incense, and wholesome bath and body and personal care products. Smell Good Spa. Use code HELLO25 for 25% off your order. Live good, feel good, smell good wholesomely. SmellGoodSpa.com.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know, which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative? I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thoughts of suicide may feel impossible to overcome, but with help and support, you can find hope and meaning. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK to speak to a counselor, or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. It's free, it's confidential, it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even if it feels like it, you are not alone.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today, my guest is Barbara Mezera, and she has written the book From Despair to Hope and Healing, One Woman's Journey in a Poem. Now, we are talking about dealing with clinical depression today, and it is a heavy topic, but yet it is something that needs to be talked about. We need to kind of get rid of that stigma, that taboo about mental health, because there are more people that need to talk about mental health, because we all go through stuff, right? We need to have someone to be able to talk to about our ups and our downs. And what better way to do that is with a professional. Now, if you're dealing with this or you have any questions or concerns, the best thing that you can do is talk to a professional near you. There are pastoral counselors like I am. You can go to a psychiatrist, a psychologist. You can even go to a clinical social worker. There are so many different people that can assist you deal with what's going on in your life so that you can be your best self. Well, Barbara, let me ask you this. So many times when we are looking for a therapist, and we kind of touched on this before we went to break, but when you're trying to find a therapist, you do have to find a therapist that is the right fit for you. Do you have any suggestions for someone who says, I want to really talk to someone? What should I look for? Is it, personality fit? Is it their office hours? What would you say?
I would say it's probably a combination of both. If I was looking for somebody now, I wouldn't go about it the same way I did when I started. I would talk to my pastor, see if they got any, people that they have referred people to. I would talk to my family physician, see if they have anybody that they would refer to. And then I would pick a couple of those names and make an appointment and go see, go talk to them for a session, see how I feel about them, see what their plan is. Because sometimes even the therapist or the doctor has kind of a preconceived idea that he's going to treat everybody not necessarily the same way, but he has a certain way that, or she has a way of how they go about treating it. And if it's not something that's going to fit you, you want to know that up front. And don't be afraid to ask them questions. That was something I never did, which probably was a mistake, but when you're so depressed that you don't even want to talk to anybody, it's pretty hard to get started in talk therapy. For me, writing was a huge benefit. And also, I used hypnosis because it was a way for me to be relaxed enough to talk about the abuse in my life and the things that were difficult. And again, that's not something, hypnosis is not something for everybody. You got to be a willing participant. And you are still in control, but you're just a little more relaxed and not quite so worried about what you're going to say, or even sometimes even thinking about what you're going to say, because you're just in a little different level of being aware. And for me, it worked. The other thing is I did a lot of journaling, which is where a lot of these poems come from. And that was a huge part of the therapy because I write pretty well, and I write a whole lot better than I talk. And and then the therapist would actually require that I read them, that I read to her what I wrote, rather than just handing her the book and having her read it. And that's a whole different way of dealing with it than I had before. And that was when I started to make progress as to accepting who I am, because, God doesn't make garbage. And for a long time, I didn't think I was worth much. And I might as well kill myself or just die, because I tried to poison myself with alcohol more than once. And it's only through the grace of God that I'm sitting here talking about it today. Because I wasn't the one that was keeping me alive when it was at its worst.
Right. Now, even though I know that this is a tough topic to talk about for many people, but it is something that we do need to discuss, and that is, unfortunately, the topic of suicide. Are there some things that helped you to avoid walking down that path? Now, of course, listeners, if you are dealing with suicidal thoughts, please call the helpline, call a hotline, seek professional care, talk to your doctor, talk to your pastor, call someone that is considered like in your support group, a good friend. Talk to someone before you make a bad decision. Well, I want to ask you, Barbara, again, what were some things that helped you deal with those thoughts?
Well, for me, the evenings was always the worst. And so I could always make it through the night. I could get up and go to work on the next day, even though I maybe wasn't functioning as well as I should have been at work. I live alone, so for me, it was important that I go to work every day. And, and I lost 3 jobs probably at least partly because of the depression. But I always ended up in a better place, so I know that's got to be God again, because I don't know how else that happens.
Right.
And I had read at one point that you should have a safe place in your house. So I decided my bed was my safe place. And once I got to bed, the only thing I could get up to do was to go to the bathroom. And then I could make it through the night. And it was almost like I had mentally pretend I was tied to my bed and, I couldn't get up to do something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a sister that was very helpful, and she was willing to listen. And I called the hotline at least twice. I still say I stayed alive because of the grace of God.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we cannot discount the power of our faith and remembering that God is always with us, even when we are going through some of our darkest times. And if you are dealing with something right now and you think that suicide might be a choice for you, let me remind you that there is someone who wants to help. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-8255. That number again is 1-800-273-8255. If you prefer to chat, go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org, suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Well, Barbara, what I want to talk to you now about is a little bit more about your book, From Despair to Hope and Healing, One Woman's Journey in Poem. What was the biggest challenge in writing your book? Was it determining which poems that you were going to include, or was it sharing the personal parts of your life? What were some of the challenges in writing?
Well, one of the challenges was definitely sharing the personal part of my life, because I'm kind of a private person, and like I said, I'm shy, as one section says, and that whole book is just a lived experience. And when I finally decided to go ahead and publish the book, and I prayed about that for probably at least a year, maybe a year and a half, and I'd wake up in the morning with this word publish in my head, and finally it's like, okay, God, that must be you, because it's too consistent to be anything else. Mm-hmm. And the biggest challenge I had was putting it together in an order that made sense. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I look at it even now and I think I tried to do too much with it. Mm-hmm. That's not the reaction, I guess, from the people that have read it, so I guess I didn't.
Right.
The poems were all written ahead of time, so it's just a matter of arranging them, putting in the introductions, and then I pretty much just left the poems speak for themselves. I didn't really do much explanation of what was going on when I wrote this poem, or what was going on when I wrote this poem. And I was invited to talk at a mental health and behavior summit at one of the education places here in Wisconsin, and there I did explain more where the poems came from, and that seemed to go over pretty well. So, maybe I should have done more of that in the book, but it's the first book I ever wrote. I didn't know what I was doing for sure, so I did what I did.
And the fact is that you got it out there, and it is amazing that so many times we think that we should have done something differently, or added, or taken away from something, and then someone comes up and says, best book ever. And like you said, it's just one of those God moments where it's like, thank you, I did what I was told to do, and I'm glad that I did it. Authors, I tell you, we are, I think, some of our hardest critics when it comes to our work. I really believe that. Now, when it comes to your faith and your journey, what role do you think that your faith has played in the journey called your life?
Well, one thing is, like I said previously, I grew up Catholic, so the faith was always part of my life, and I'm a cradle Catholic. But as I was going through the depression and stuff, people would look at me and say, well, you're Catholic, you shouldn't be even thinking about killing yourself. And I would look at them and shoot right back, but I believe in a loving and forgiving God. And then as time went on, and I was with a friend when one of their nephews killed himself or died by suicide, and I realized then that, if you really believe in God, you just don't do that to the people that love you or the people who you love. You know, and so that's when I realized that, yeah, physically I'm capable of doing it, but I will never do it because you don't do that to the people who love you or the people that you love. And that was also brought to me one of the last times when I was sitting there with my alcohol and my pills all lined up, ready to do the deed. And I thought, well, should I write a note or shouldn't I? And then I got thinking about my little brother, and I had my niece was about 2, and I had a nephew 3 and 4. And it's like, well, the 2 and 3-year-old might not even remember me, but that 4-year-old's a pretty bright little guy. And how do I do something that's going to require my brother, who we're very close to, explaining to him what happened to his aunt? And we've had such good times since then. I was able to have each of my nieces and nephews alone 2 or 3 times during their summer vacations, just one-on-one. And, you know, so again, the grace of God keeping me from following through on those plans is just kind of amazing.
It is, and let me tell you, I am so glad that we have an awesome God, and I'm so glad that you followed through and you shared your poetry with us, and not only has it helped you deal with depression, but it is helping others deal with depression and know that, yes, there is someone out there who cares, who has experienced it, and can help you go through it as well. Well, Barbara, Mezera, thank you so much for being on the show today. I am truly glad that you were able to share. One last time, if you would please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we pick up a copy, and how do we follow you online?
Okay, the title of my book is From Despair to Hope and Healing, One Woman's Journey in Poem. You can follow me online on Facebook. And I also have a website. It's barbaramezerabooks.com, and where the book's available. It's available at Amazon. It's also available to Litfire Publishing.
All righty. Thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and spending this time with us today. Again, if you are dealing with the blues, or you're dealing with clinical depression, or you're dealing with suicidal thoughts, know that you are not alone. Please find professional care near you, all the way from Christian counselors to pastoral counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, or even the social worker. Simply type in one of those words, near me, pastoral counselor, near me, and you can find someone that can assist you. If you're dealing with suicidal thoughts, remember that you can call the hotline at 1-800-273-8255. That number again, 1-800-273-8255, and someone will be there to talk with you. And as always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.
Thoughts of suicide may feel impossible to overcome, but with help and support, you can find hope and meaning. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK to speak to a counselor, or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. It's free, it's confidential, it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even if it feels like it, you are not alone.